Alright guys, time to grab the pill and chuck a quick hand pass before snapping a torp from the 50 for a glorious 6-pointer on the siren.
Are we still talking about the same sport?
Footy!
Footy! AFL Evolution is the latest attempt to capture the spirit of Australian rules football and distill it into a fast-paced sports title, something that's been attempted a few times before, often with mixed results.
Indeed. The sport of AFL is unique in that it not only combines different styles of play, but it also has a lot of technical rules and tends to stop and start a lot, which can make translating it into an enjoyable video game rather difficult.
Fortunately, Evolution does its best to keep things flowing by focusing on quick handballs, lots of spillages to keep the ball moving, and a bit less tackling than previous titles. And of course, there's still the all-important marking the ball, which requires you to run your player into position and press a time-based button prompt. That said, none of this is very well explained.
Yeah, I don't follow the sport myself, so I was hoping for some sort of guided tutorials or even just like a walkthrough of the rules. But the only practice option available was to have a run around, which put me alone in an empty stadium to try and work it out myself. Hello? Anyone? Does anyone want to play with me? It was really depressing.
Yeah, it seems like the only real way to get to grips with the game is to jump into a quick match. It's not exactly ideal, but it didn't take me too long before I had at least a basic understanding of the controls.
Can he kick it from here, Richo? Most players at this level shouldn't have any trouble with this conversion. 40 metres from home. Get back in from this position.
Aside from standard match play, you can choose career mode, which gives you the option of following a real-life pro player or creating your own to play through the different leagues.
And we've seen this before in other sports games, where you take control, manage and upgrade a single player's professional career. And for the most part, this works well, giving you objectives to reach and stats to upgrade and track. But the on-field action controlling a single player isn't really much fun, and it's hard to follow if you're really far from the action. Guys, kick it to me! Come on, over... Oh, no, me, over here, I'm open! Felt like school sport all over again, Rad.
Oh, well, playing as a team is always more exciting. And this is available if you select to coach a team, which is how I preferred to play, especially as they've now included the Women's League this time around too.
Brisbane sprint onto the field. Some extremely on edge.
Yeah, go girls! Woo!
You can also choose to simulate matches if you'd prefer to just deal with the management side of things, such as sponsorship, injuries, and tribunal disputes. It's not really my thing, but I do know many AFL fans love poring over this stuff, so I'm glad it's all there. But guys, we've only covered the outer crust of this game, and I think we need to dig into the meat of this review and talk about the gameplay.
Oh, well, just like a meat pie at the Footy Goose, once you take it back to your seat and have a bite, you realise that the whole thing is just a hot mess. Player movement is extremely wonky, which makes reading the field difficult. Kicks often don't go where you've aimed. And even with what I thought was perfect timing, many of my attempts to mark the ball would fail. So in the end, it felt more like sheer luck if I would end up with a grab.
The football in the game. Jenkins.
Well, sadly, Rad, I know exactly what you mean. It did feel good to string a few handballs together and make a successful run to the forward line, but more often than not, my plays would end up shut down by an inaccurate kick or an overly contested mark. Which I guess is realistic when you look at a real-life match of AFL, but it still feels awkward to play in video game form, and far less satisfying than, say, in a match of soccer, for example.
Well, this game was made by a smaller studio that only releases AFL games every few years, so it's not exactly fair to compare it with other annual franchises such as FIFA or Madden, who have had many iterations to work out the kinks.
That's true, Darren, and I don't want to sound like we're being too harsh on this. But even once you get past the gameplay flaws, you're still left with something that looks and sounds like a last-gen game.
Here's the pun, not getting his first. The first goal for Melbourne.
Watts has the passion for this game.
Maybe even the generation before that.
Ooh, tough call, Umpire Daz.
I'll allow it.
Here we go. It's the Western Bulldogs versus Melbourne. Whack. Have that, mate.
I think it would be hard to recommend this to anyone who isn't an absolute die-hard footy fan, wouldn't you say, Goose?
Yeah, spot on, Rad. I mean, I had a blast seeing my beloved D's have a kick around the Port Melbourne Oval while Dennis Committee rambled on in the background.
St Kilda, woeful. More gaps in their team than a 7-year-old smile.
But at no point, I think, was I actually enjoying playing the game itself. At best, this is a fun couch multiplayer game with other footy fans, but I still think AFL has a long way to evolve yet if it wants to be taken seriously as a modern sports sim. So I'm giving it 2 out of 5 rubber chickens.
Sadly, I still know just as little about AFL as before I played this game, which is a real shame because I was hoping it could teach me something. I'm giving it 1.5 out of 5 rubber chickens. So tell me again what a ruck is.
Well, the ruck takes the bounce of the ball up from the centre circle.
The center is the middle.
Yeah.